You wanted them to text back. That is why the resentment feels so ugly. You sent the first message. You suggested coffee. You were glad when they answered. You meant it. And then a few days later, their name lights up on your phone, and your whole body changes. Your chest drops. Your jaw tightens. Your hand just hovers there, like opening the message would open something bigger than the message itself. You stare at the screen. You were the one who wanted this contact. You were the one who missed them. But right now, all you feel is pressure. And if someone saw that flash of irritation hit your face, they would read it all wrong. They would call you hot and cold, inconsistent, maybe even fake. But a lot of the time, this is not dishonesty. It is a crash. Real desire just collided with real limits, and your body is trying to shut the door before the cost of staying open climbs any higher. That is the part people keep misreading. You did want them. The first yes was real. The warmth was real. The relief was real. But so is the exhaustion that shows up later. Because contact does not stay frozen in its sweetest form. It grows. It accumulates. It develops momentum. A message becomes a thread. A thread becomes an expectation. An expectation becomes access. And access means someone can reach you now. Not only when you are open, generous, curious, and full of room, but when you are tired, overworked, overstimulated, emotionally thinned out, and already trying to hold the rest of your life together. That is where resentment begins. Not at the start. In the middle, when the contact is no longer new enough to feel intoxicating, but still active enough to keep drawing from you. That is the sentence people rarely say out loud. The wanting was real. The recoil is real. Tuesday. You miss them. Tuesday. You have energy. Tuesday. Attention feels flattering. Their message feels like a reward. Being wanted feels soft. Easy. Light. By Friday, your bandwidth is gone. Work took some. Stress took some. Noise took some. Obligations took some. The invisible labor of staying functional all week took more than you realized. So now, the same person who felt like comfort on Tuesday can feel like pressure on Friday. That does not mean Tuesday was a lie. It means Friday has a price. And if you were never taught the difference between emotional desire and actual capacity, that shift can feel morally disgusting. You know how it looks. You reached out first. You made the plan. You answered fast in the beginning. You sounded warm. So when your replies slow down later, it can look like manipulation. Like you wanted pursuit, not presence. Like you wanted attention, not intimacy. Like you only like people before they become real. But that reading misses the most important thing. Wanting contact and sustaining contact are not the same skill. You can crave connection and still get saturated by it. You can care deeply and still get tired by access. You can want closeness and still feel trapped by continuity. That is not always fake. Sometimes it is overload arriving late. A lot of people only think about contact emotionally. Do I like them? Do I not? Do I care? Do I not? But contact is not only emotional, it is attentional, physiological. It asks for response, tone tracking, empathy, timing, self-regulation, social prediction, and the constant micro-adjustments involved in staying available. For some people, that processing runs quietly in the background. For others, it burns through energy fast. Stress researchers sometimes call that buildup allostatic load, the cost the body pays for having to keep adjusting, even when each individual demand looks small. That is why a perfectly kind message can still feel heavy. Not because the person is heavy, because your system is already carrying too much, and because the line is still open. Sometimes, that is the part your body is reacting to most, not the words. The opening, there is a moment people know, and almost never admit. The conversation ended an hour ago. The phone is face down. No new message has come in. And still, you do not feel free, because some part of you knows it will resume. There is an unfinished social thread, still sitting in the room with you, a door still cracked open, an expectation still alive. And until that door fully closes, your body does not settle. Psychologists have long noticed that unfinished loops stay mentally active longer than completed ones. That is why contact can keep occupying you long after the screen goes dark. That is when resentment starts showing up in small, ugly flashes, a sharp exhale at their name, a wave of heaviness at a perfectly normal check-in, the private thought of, not right now, before the guilt rushes in, the urge to delay, not because you have nothing to say, but because you cannot bear to reopen the thread. Then you turn the knife inward. You call yourself fake, immature, avoidant, unreliable, too much, not built for real closeness, but what looks fake, can be a body registering cost faster than the mind wants to admit it. That matters, because if you keep misnaming the problem, you will keep solving it the wrong way. You will promise more access. To prove your care is real, you will answer while depleted. So you do not seem cold. You will go to the dinner, take the call, keep the thread alive, force the warmth, push your way through the plan. Your body is already resisting, and then you will resent the other person more for believing you. That is how people get trapped inside their own sincerity, not because they never cared, because they cared past capacity. There is a cycle here that quietly tears relationships apart. First, you feel lonely. You miss them. You reach out. You make the plan. You feel relieved that connection is finally happening. Then the plan gets closer. The messages keep coming. The contact becomes more continuous. Then you expected. Now the thread is alive all day. Now your attention is partially occupied. Now you are not just looking forward to the connection. You are already paying for it. Then something in you starts pulling back. You start hoping they might cancel. You want an interruption? You do not have to feel guilty for. You tell yourself, maybe I am just tired. Maybe once I get there, it will feel easy. Maybe the resentment will disappear if I just push through it. So you go, and you are not fake when you show up. That is what makes this so painful. You laugh. You listen. You care. Some part of you is genuinely glad to be there, but another part of you is already counting the cost. How long has this been going? How much energy is left? How much more warmth do I have to manufacture before I can leave? How much longer do I have to sound like I am not tired? That performance drains what little reserve you had left. Because you are not only spending energy to be there, you are spending energy hiding the fact that the contact stopped feeling good a while ago. Then you get home hollowed out, irritated, ashamed, a little trapped by your own life, and you make a vow in the dark. No more plans, no more threads, no more giving people enough access to become another open tab in your head until the loneliness comes back. And then the cycle repeats. That is the cruelty of this pattern. You still want people, you just do not know how to want them. In ways your body can sustain, you do not know how to say, I want you, but I cannot hold unbroken access. I like hearing from you, but not every day. I want closeness, but not constant availability. I care, but I need enough silence for that care to stay warm. So instead, you alternate between over-opening and pulling away. And from the outside, that can look like inconsistency. But inconsistency is not the same as falseness. Being fake is pretending to care when you do not. This is different. You care. You just cannot keep paying for connection in the form it is arriving. That is the deepest truth under all of this. You do not resent the person. You resent the access. You resent the feeling that contact stopped being a choice and started becoming a requirement. You resent the invisible pressure of maintenance. You resent the way warmth is expected to stay available on demand. You resent the way a human bond can quietly start occupying mental space. You never agreed to surrender. That is when affection begins dragging resentment behind it. Not because your feelings died, because the cost rose. And when the cost of staying open keeps rising, while the body keeps trying to hold the line anyway, something has to give. Warmth starts sounding tired. Kindness starts feeling forced. Replies get flatter. Silence gets longer. And your nervous system starts using irritation, the way an alarm uses noise, to push you toward the only thing it trusts. Will stop the drain. Distance. Not because distance is what you truly want, because it is the fastest thing your body knows. That is the climax most people never name clearly enough. You do not start resenting contact because your feelings were fake. You start resenting contact when genuine desire collides with limited capacity, and the cost of ongoing access keeps rising, while your nervous system keeps trying to keep the door open anyway. That is when care starts sounding strained. That is when tenderness starts arriving, with tension attached. That is when love itself can begin to feel like pressure, not because love became false, because your system became overextended. None of this means every withdrawal is healthy. Sometimes people do disappear. Instead of communicating, sometimes they let resentment build in silence until the other person gets punished for a limit they were never told about. Sometimes self-protection hardens into passive cruelty because honesty felt too exposing in the moment. That matters too. But honesty gets easier when shame gets more accurate. It is easier to say, "This matters to me, but I cannot do it in this form all the time," than to keep pretending everything is fine, until your whole body starts hating the sound of being needed. It is easier to say, "I still want contact, but I need less continuity, less open thready, less pressure to maintain, than to keep replying from depletion, until resentment poisons the very thing you are trying to protect. Because the goal is not to become unreachable. The goal is not to stop wanting people. The goal is not to harden into someone who never reaches out again. The goal is to stop offering access you cannot actually sustain, to stop confusing desire with endless capacity, to stop turning overload into a character flaw, to stop calling yourself fake when your body was only telling the truth earlier than your mind could. You are allowed to want connection in doses. You are allowed to need pauses before affection turns into irritation. You are allowed to care deeply and still protect your capacity. You are allowed to love someone and still need them out of your head for a few days. That is not dishonesty. That is not failure. That is not proof that you are broken at intimacy. That is learning the difference between connection and overexposure. So if you have started resenting contact you once wanted, say it more carefully than shame would. You did not trick anyone by wanting it. You probably just stayed open too long. And if you do not learn that difference, you will keep confusing your limit with a loss of love, until every bond starts feeling like a test you are failing. But if you do learn it, something bigger becomes possible. Not endless availability, not perfect consistency. Something better, a form of closeness that does not require you to abandon your nervous system in order to prove your heart is real. Because the point of connection was never to become more reachable than your body can survive. The point was to feel close without disappearing. If this felt painfully familiar, stay close. There is more of this, and you do not have to keep naming it alone.